Hello and welcome to Podmas, the podcast for the Israeli Tax Authority. I'm Aliyah. Those of you who follow us are probably surprised to hear me talking in English right now. This podcast is usually delivered in Hebrew. The reason this episode is different is because our topic today is tax benefits for newcomers into Israel. So, if you are considering immigration to Israel or making Aliyah, as we call it, please join us. With me here today is Nava Namir from the Department of International Taxation in the Israeli Tax Authority. Welcome, Nava.
Hi, Avital.
And we will be discussing all aspects relevant to newcomers regarding tax. Please join us. So, Nava, tax benefits for immigrants, not a common thing, I imagine. Is Israel unique in that matter, as I imagine, or...
Yeah, well, Israel is unique, although there are other countries that offer benefits for, they would call them immigrants, we call them new residents or olim. Mm-hmm. The benefits are different, I think. I've heard about in Italy, Greece, maybe Portugal. I think they try to target newcomers who are wealthy, or as they're called, high net worth individuals. Mm-hmm. Or skilled, qualified academics, and they offer the benefits to, well, most of these regimes offer benefits to certain groups of people that they're interested to attract.
So you said there are other countries that offer benefits for immigrants, but usually the legislation targets specific professions or people with a certain amount of income, usually high income.
High income or qualified individuals. I think that's one difference that I noticed. Another difference is that some of the regimes, and we'll talk about it later, offer benefits for income accrued in the country and not only foreign income.
For, again, please?
For income that was generated locally. Mm-hmm. And that may be different from the regime that we'll talk about today.
Okay.
The benefits for Israeli olim are offered to all olim, and they're not conditioned on certain wealth or qualification. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, one major difference that I noticed.
So this brings us to Israel. How long has Israel had benefits for immigrants? Since the country was founded, or?
I'm not sure when the first benefits were offered, but I think a point in time that is important is 2003. Mm-hmm. There were benefits before 2003, but before 2003, the tax system in Israel was what you'd call territorial system. So generally, only income that was generated in Israel mm-hmm. was subject to tax.
Okay.
There were some cases where...
exceptions, but
generally that was the case. And in 2003, the system was reformed, mm-hmm. and now Israel's tax system is a personal tax system.
So if you're a resident of Israel, you're subject to tax also on your income in other countries.
Worldwide taxation.
Pending, of course, on tax treaties and
of course.
No double tax, and
right.
etc., etc.
Right. Yeah. But the principle is that an Israeli resident is subject to tax on worldwide income. Mm-hmm. So when that change was legislated, side by side, the benefits for olim
had to change,
and they were revised so that olim would have a period where they wouldn't be affected as much by tax considerations when they moved to Israel. It was intended to attract olim, to remove barriers. Mm-hmm. So more than to attract olim because of the tax rate, it was intended to make the process more seamless. Mm-hmm. So for a certain period, the initial period, the ole wouldn't have that many considerations, and the transition to another tax system would be easier.
Okay, so this brings us to the heart of the issue. So let's start. There are various benefits, but let's start at the core of the benefits, which I guess is what you're referring to, income tax.
Right. So maybe just one word before we'll talk about the population that can enjoy this, and just to say from the start that we're talking about Olim, people who are new residents, the first time that they become residents of Israel, but also on what's called veteran returning residents. So if a person was once an Israeli resident, and then they leave and become resident of another country and return after more than 10 years, they qualify for benefits that are
you say
the
at
same.
more than 10 years. What happens if they come to visit in the middle? What's the maximum time they can spend?
That's not a problem. A visit wouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
They have to be considered resident of Israel to cut the stretch of the time, the 10-year period. So
if for a period of minimum 10 years they lived outside Israel, they were not considered residents of Israel for tax purposes, which is a process in itself. You need to do what's known as a detachment of your tax relations to Israel.
Not so much a process, more...
it's a legal status, right?
It's a legal status. It takes account of various factors. It's not a bureaucratic process that you apply for or sign or do that. Residence is determined according to the center of life test. So it's
let's not go
not
into
a
that
quantifiable
because
test,
it's a very wide issue, and we
right.
have a separate episode on that.
Exactly.
On the question of who is an Israeli for tax purposes. But if you were not an Israeli for tax purposes for a minimum of 10 years and then you return, you get the same benefits as someone who has never been an Israeli and has immigrated.
The benefits for income that we'll talk about are the same.
Okay.
There's some differences, but we'll get to them. So, the first and I think most important benefit is that for 10 years, an Oleh would be exempt on income that was derived outside of Israel, foreign income, from all types of income. So that would include regular income from business, income from work. It would include passive income, dividends, interest, rent, capital gains on foreign assets. All these kinds of income would be exempt from tax in Israel for 10 years. Right.
Okay. How do you determine whether an income is generated in Israel or outside Israel? And I'm specifically referring to, this is the 21st century. People have businesses that are online. I don't know, cryptocurrency, various assets that it's very difficult to determine the location.
That's right. From our aspects, when we're talking about people who came to Israel and work from Israel, so if there's business activity occurring in Israel, there will be taxation in Israel. There may be cases where part of the income will be considered to have accrued abroad, but if the active part of the business is taking place in Israel, so there will be it would be considered income that's accrued in Israel.
If you're advising clients, for instance, and you immigrate to Israel and you keep working from your home in Israel, even though the clients are abroad, that would be considered income generated in Israel.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Whether online or in any other form, the income would be generated in Israel.
On the other hand, if you owned a restaurant in New York, for example, and you immigrate to Israel and the restaurant keeps generating profit in New York,
that would be
considered
right,
abroad.
Right. We'd look at where the business activity is taking place, and that would be the place of accrual. There could be cases where income is accrued partially in Israel and partially abroad. So if, for instance, you take the restaurant, if most of the time the restaurant runs itself and the Oleh is situated in Israel and he doesn't work for the business from here, so the income would be considered to have accrued abroad. But if, let's say, for a few months in a year or in certain times, the Oleh would work at the restaurant, that would be income that's accrued in abroad, and it would qualify for benefits for Olim.
So you can also, what happens if he works in Israel and he has income in Israel, and at the same time he files a report that divides between income?
Yes, exactly. We expect that in such cases the income would be apportioned according to the number of business days. Generally, there may be exceptions for special businesses, but and then we'd expect the Ole to report the income that was accrued in Israel, the part of the income that was accrued in Israel, and pay tax on that, and the other part would be exempt from tax in Israel.
Okay. And what about businesses that are not brick and mortar, that are, I don't know, online services, for instance, and the company is listed in America, but the person lives in Israel and he's the only employee and he works from his apartment in Tel Aviv? How do we look at that?
So if you look at the Israeli perspective, a company that is managed and controlled by an Israeli resident from Israel would usually be considered an Israeli company, and all income would be subject to Israeli tax. However, for new residents, for Olim, this rule has an exception, and control and management would not determine the residency of the company, or that it would not be subject to tax. It would enjoy the same benefits as for the period that the Ole enjoys the exception.
So you say usually in this case we would look at this company as an Israeli company if an Israeli is running it from his apartment in Tel Aviv.
Right. Now,
but if this
the
Israeli
company would not be considered Israeli, but if the individual is working from Israel for the company, so we would have income for that part that would be considered income that has accrued in Israel.
But in the case of an Ole, we would look at this as income accrued.
No. If the work is performed in Israel, so that would be business that is performed in Israel, and that would be business that's generated from Israel by a foreign company. But for work that is performed in Israel, there is always taxation.
Okay. Now, you say 10 years. When you measure 10 years, a main question is when do you begin to measure? What determines the date in which the Aliyah, the immigration, has occurred, and immigrants supposed to come to the Israeli tax authority and say, "Hi, I'm here and this is my first day in Israel"?
No. And that brings us to another benefit, and maybe we should talk about that. For the first year that an individual has become a resident of Israel, he has the option of requesting to be considered for that first year as a foreign resident. It would be called an acclimation year, or
sort of a grace period.
Yes, for just 1 year. Now, during that year, he would be considered a foreign resident, but that year would be included in the 10-year period of benefits. So at the end of the year, if he stays in Israel, he has 9 more years of benefits.
Okay.
If he leaves, it's as if he was never a resident of Israel. So.
And this is important. Why?
It's important because if he returns after a couple of years or later, he could once again be considered a new resident
and get the 10 years and not just
10-year
9
benefit
years.
Period. Exactly. Yes.
Now, okay, from what you're saying, I understand that if I come to Israel and I spend 4 years and then I leave and I stop being a resident of Israel and I return, I don't get the 10 years because I got the 4 years.
No, once the 10-year period starts running, it won't be stopped. You can't pause it. So
I can't get the reminder. I can't get 6 years now.
Not when you come the next time, unless, of course, you became a foreign resident in the interim for at least 10 years, and then you can be a veteran returning resident.
You can be a veteran returning even if you were an Ole?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If you were a foreign resident for 10 years.
Okay, so let's state this again very clearly. If I was born in Israel, raised in Israel, I left Israel, I stopped being an Israeli for at least 10 years, and I return, I get the same benefit as someone who has never been an Israeli and has now arrived.
Right.
If I arrive and I get these 10 years and I don't make the most of the 10 years, I only use up 4 or 5, and I leave and I return again, I can't get...
After at least 10 years.
After at least 10 years, I can get 10 years again?
Yes.
An additional 10 years.
Yes.
But if I return after less than 10 years, I get nothing.
Not nothing. There's another form of benefit that's granted
Yeah, but I don't get the 5 years that I didn't use the first time.
Returning resident.
Okay.
That's right. That's right.
What do you get?
If you were away for 10 years?
No, if you came for 4 years and you left and then you return after less than 10 years, you
So
get something.
for returning residents that have been foreign residents for less than 10 years, at least 6 years and less than 10 years, there are lesser benefits, which we won't discuss this time.
Okay.
But they're not as substantial.
Okay. Now, okay, all we've discussed now has been in effect since 2003, right?
There have been changes in 2007. The benefits were updated and enhanced. So, but generally,
this is a situation. Now you have had some reforms recently,
Right.
which are worth mentioning, I think.
right, and we'll soon go back to some more benefits that Olim receive.
Absolutely.
Initially, when these benefits were granted in starting 2007, Olim were exempt from reporting foreign income in Israel.
Mhm.
So they didn't have to pay tax, and they also didn't have to report any of
Let's
their
state this
income
clearly
or
for our
assets.
listeners. There's a difference between reporting and paying.
Exactly. So before this,
Before the recent reform, you didn't even have to report them.
nothing.
Okay.
You all assets and income that were foreign were not reported.
None
in
of our
Israel.
business. Okay.
Recently, and that would be Amendment 272, Israel will start receiving reports from Olim about assets and income that have been generated abroad, even though the income would still be exempt from tax in Israel.
This takes effect from...
This takes effect for Olim who come to Israel after January 2026.
So if you're an Oleh and you're coming after January 1st, 2026, you still get the 10 years.
You get the 10
We don't
years.
tax anything you make abroad, but you
Right.
still have to report it.
Exactly.
Why do we want to know about something that we're not going to tax?
Okay, so this is actually interesting because Israel is part of an international community of countries and jurisdictions who cooperate in exchange of information and help each other enforce their tax laws. And we're party to a number of forums and groups that take this very seriously. And the fact that there's no reporting requirement is problematic because it could be used to shelter income from other jurisdictions, and that created a situation where we couldn't meet our obligations to the international community, and this was subject to scrutiny, and Israel made the changes that were needed in order to meet the international standard in exchange of information.
Okay, but in very broad lines, how does it help somebody hide capital? The fact that he can move to Israel and not report the income that has occurred in another country. I mean, he pays taxes in the other country.
Yes, all the benefits that we're talking about don't affect the reporting obligations or the payment of tax in other countries. But we are aware quite often, well, not often, but the framework of exchange of information was created to help jurisdictions deal with taxpayers that don't report everything that they're obliged to report, or for some reason don't pay what they're obliged to pay. And international cooperation has been proven to be very helpful for jurisdictions, and we enjoy it in other cases, and we help and cooperate with jurisdictions according to the rules that have been set. So achieving a complete framework that covers a person,
I imagine
even
it's
if
also
we change
important. It's
residence.
also important for the Israeli tax authority to get these reports, because once the 10 years end, you do want to have a full picture of what the person owns, right?
That's true. But that wasn't the
That wasn't the incentive.
main reason for the new legislation. So, first of all, just a few words on that. So the Ole would have to report exempt income.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be categorized as exempt income, reported, and no tax paid. And we discussed before, a company that's managed and controlled by an Ole, that is not subject to tax in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
But following this reform of reporting obligations, so such a company would have to file financial reports in Israel if requested to do so by the tax officer. But only financial, they would file financial reports. They don't have to file a tax report because they're not subject to tax. So that's another major change. There are also changes in a number of registries that will start to be handled in Israel.
A few more words about this significant, the 272 change. You mentioned earlier the year of grace period.
Right.
That you can come for 1 year and not be considered. What happens to people who came in 2025 and declared that they want to have that grace seal, and when the period ends, they are already in 2026, are they considered people who immigrated after January 1st, 2026 or before?
Yes.
They are?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a unique situation, but because they were not considered residents in the acclamation year, their residency begins in 2026.
So that's
important
they would to mention. If you came during 2025 and you declared a year of grace period, sort of a year in which you are not considered a resident of Israel, then you are obliged to report about your exempt income for 10 years. We have benefits on property tax, right? Or purchase tax of apartments.
Right, but maybe before we move on to that kind of property tax, a word about capital gains.
Okay.
So the situation today, and it's different from the earlier versions of the law, is that an Ole receives exemption from capital tax on all assets that he had and has today during the 10-year period outside of Israel. So even if the Ole purchased assets during the 10-year period, those assets would be exempt from tax.
We're talking about stocks?
We're talking about stocks, we're talking about real estate, we're talking about any assets.
So you can keep buying assets abroad for 10 years and they are still exempt?
Right.
What happens if you sell them after the 10-year period?
So that's the other point that I wanted to bring up. After the 10-year period, so there's an apportionment of the gain according to the period of holding before and after the end of the 10-year period.
So if I bought it when I still had 5 years of my exemption period and I sold it after 10 years, I will pay only half.
Right. That's right.
Because I have 5 years after the end of the exemption period
and 5 years
before the end of the exemption period.
Yeah.
And this goes for real estate, it goes for stocks, it goes for cryptocurrency, etc., etc. All capital gain.
Whatever is considered capital gain.
Okay.
So another benefit, still when we're talking about income and
tax,
passive
yeah.
income, interest on for bank accounts with foreign currency in Israel would be taxed, would also enjoy
Even if
an
it's an
exemption.
Israeli bank?
Yes, yes. So if a foreign resident had a foreign resident account in Israel and interest was exempt from tax, when he makes Aliyah, he continues to receive
Even though
the
the
same
account is no
treatment.
longer a foreign
It's
account.
not a foreign account.
It's an Israeli
Yeah,
account.
that's another point. We're talking about regular income.
For 10 years or?
Yes.
For the 10-year period?
Yes. And the only exception about capital gains and stock that you're talking about is stock that would, actually two exemptions. One would be stock that was given to an employee of an Israeli company because of work performed in Israel. So even if you get stock, right? Even if you get stocks of a foreign company, those would not enjoy the exemption because they're considered to be for work performed in Israel.
Okay.
And another exemption worth mentioning is just that if you receive a gift from an Israeli resident during that period, it would also not enjoy the exemption. And before we move on to property, there's a whole world of rules that apply to trusts in Israel.
Right.
And the status of being a new resident and an ole factors as one of the major factors in determining the tax treatment of the trust. So that's something to keep in mind regarding the status of ole and income that's received by. So you asked about property taxes in Israel, and what we're talking about is when a new resident in ole purchases.
He comes to Israel. He wants to buy an apartment.
He wants to buy an apartment in Israel, and in that case, in Israel, when someone buys an apartment or buys real estate, they pay purchase tax.
Yeah,
that's the tax that the buyer pays according to the value of the price that he paid for the apartment. And in the case of Olim, there have been in the past benefits that lower the tax that the Ole has to pay. Recently, in 2024, the rate of tax and the regime for Olim has been changed. So regarding the rates, now for the first, the tax is applied according to the
value of
the apartment and in steps. So in the first step, which
the first step is zero tax
up to 1.9 million shekel approximately. There's no tax for an ole. So for the second step, which is up to 6 million shekel, an ole will pay only 0.5% of purchase tax, which is 0.5%.
Which Israelis usually pay somewhere between 3% and 5%.
Right.
On these apartments.
Right. And
so that's a lot of money.
Yeah. It's a significant benefit.
And for those of you who are not aware, apartments in Israel, most of them
are expensive.
More than 2 million.
Yeah. And over that amount, so the regular rates would apply, which
is different than the state that was before. I think they had as 0.5% on everything, right?
There are a number of differences. There was 0.5%, but also there's a difference in the application of the rule. Previously, there were an ole would receive this benefit for a single apartment, and also you could buy another apartment as an ole. Now these benefits apply only to one apartment for the ole, but they're more substantial.
Yeah. So we narrowed the benefit in a certain sense in order not to give the benefit to olim who are very wealthy, who are buying several apartments, or are buying apartments that are over 6 million shekel, which are luxury apartments.
Right.
We narrowed it sort of to the frame of something that a middle class family buys, one apartment, less than 6 million shekel, but the benefit has become more substantial now because the 0.5% applies to up to 6 million.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And so for a single apartment only, the Ole receives these benefits. But he can also receive benefits on a business dwelling, on a place where he himself
On
will
commercial real
conduct
estate. Yeah.
a business.
Which before it was only for residential real estate?
No, before there was also
Okay.
a benefit for business real estate. Now that the benefit is limited to a single apartment, so it's important to say that doesn't decrease or affect the benefit for a business.
But you can enjoy the benefit for a residential apartment and a commercial asset, or you have to choose between the two.
Yes, you can enjoy both.
Okay, so you can have one residential asset and one commercial asset.
Right.
Enjoy the benefit.
Right.
Okay.
It has steps and it's limited. And what's important to say though is that the Ole must work in the place that was purchased for the commercial.
So it has to be your business.
Right.
You can't rent it to somebody else.
Right.
Okay.
So I think that's about the purchase tax. Maybe just one more word. For purchase of a business place, it must be purchased between 1 year before or 7 years after the Ole made Aliyah.
Okay.
And the period where the Ole was in the army or in civil service would not be counted.
It would not be counted for the purposes of the purchase tax?
Right, for the period.
But not for the 10-year period
no.
of exemption?
No.
Okay. Any other benefits we want to mention?
Yes. There's a benefit for a pension that an Ole may receive for work that was performed abroad.
Okay.
And there's Article 9 C of the income tax ordinance states that an Ole would be taxed on his pension for work performed abroad at the same rate that he would have been taxed had he continued to live in the state of origin.
Okay.
And this applies after the 10-year period, because in the first 10-year period, the pension, as any other passive income, would be exempt from tax.
It's considered income accrued abroad, and
right,
it's not
and
taxed.
it's exempt from tax. But after the 10-year period, so the rate of tax would not be higher than that he would have been subject to if he had not come to Israel.
Okay. And it's also worth mentioning, if you mention that all we are saying here relies greatly on tax treaties that Israel has with the country of origin that you immigrated from, right?
That's right. It's all these benefits apply regardless of the tax treaty. So and what we're discussing here is taxation in Israel. So a new resident will probably pay tax abroad for income accrued abroad.
Yeah.
That's not something that we're changing. Once the resident is an Israeli resident, so we have the tax treaties of Israel that apply and determine the
so how
rates
much
and
you
the
will
treatment.
pay for income accrued abroad, if you will pay, depends on the tax treaty that Israel has or doesn't have with the country in which the income
In some cases, yes.
is generated.
Yes.
And of course tax treaties also include articles that are meant to prevent a
Double
case
taxation.
of double
Right.
taxation.
That's right.
Right. Okay, thank you, Nava. Anything else
Yes,
you want to?
we forgot
Okay.
one important part, and that those are benefits that apply to income accrued in Israel or abroad, and those are the tax credits for an Ole.
Of course, we forgot the tax
We
credits.
forgot the tax credits. So any
But
Ole,
a word on tax credits
Yes.
before we mention. Maybe they don't know the
term.
The term.
Okay, so we're discussing domestic tax credits. Okay, and maybe we should just make a distinction.
In the Israeli system, we have tax credits. There's like points.
That's right.
Every citizen has points, and every point is worth a certain amount of shkalim.
That's right. So if you're an Israeli citizen, you get
264, or maybe
I saw that it's 242 per
242.
month and
Yeah,
2,900 something for a year.
that means if you have a tax debt, if you have to pay tax, we reduce from this debt according to the number of points you have.
Right. So this amount is subtracted from the tax you have to pay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's review the credit points that immigrants get. If I'm correct, we are making a separation between people who immigrated before January 1st, 2022 and those who immigrated after.
Right. There's a recent amendment that made the differentiation between those that became new residents before and after January 2022. So in the old regime that was before, for those that came to Israel before 2022, there are 3 periods. The first 18 months of being an Israeli resident, an Ole is entitled to a fourth of a point, which is 726 shekels per month, reduction in tax.
2025 numbers. These numbers are
right.
Updated every year according to inflation.
Right. So in rates that apply in 2025, it would be 726 shekel a month.
Okay.
Then for the next 12 months, it's 1/6 of a point, which is 484 shekel per month. And for the last 12 months, it's 1/12 of a point, which is 242 shekels.
Okay. And those who came after?
For those who came after, there's an extra year, an extra period, an extra stage. It begins with 12 months, where the Ole will receive 1/12 of a point. That's 242 shekel a month. That's the first period with the Ole is in Israel. And the second period would be the 18-month period, where he would receive a quarter of a point, a credit point, which is the 726 shekel.
Mm-hmm.
Then, for another 12 months, he would receive 484 shekel. That's 1/6 of a point. And for the last year, again, a 1/12 of a point, that's 242 shekels. So altogether, for 54 months, an Ole that came to Israel after 2022, during 2022, would receive the credit points.
So this is a reduction from the tax you would owe on income occurred in Israel.
Right.
Okay.
In Israel or abroad, all income.
But the income abroad is exempt.
Right. So that would be right. And just a word about the period of benefits. So
it's basically the same, but they added a year in the beginning, which
right.
is lower.
Right, probably because you would expect the first year to be more difficult.
So they wouldn't
and maybe the income wouldn't be as high as after once the Ole became more absorbed and more part of the local economy and local business.
So they okay.
So another point to keep in mind is that these benefits are stayed. They are stopped for when the Ole goes either to the army or during a period of academic studies. So you can postpone, you can stop the 54-month period.
You can freeze it.
You can freeze it, exactly. And you go to the army, you study, academic studies, and
this applies also for the 10-year period?
No.
Only for the credit points.
Right.
Okay.
Credit points for an Ole do not apply, and that's distinction to veteran returning residents. So if you're a veteran returning resident, you will receive the benefits for an Ole for income accrued abroad and foreign income, but you will not receive the credit points for Ole.
So if you were an Israeli once and you're returning after more than 10 years, the 10 years are relevant, but the credit points are not.
Right. But if you left Israel as a minor under the age of 18, Nevertheless, even though you're a returning resident, you can still receive the credit points.
So they are only relevant to those who were never Israelis, unless they were Israelis and they left when they were minors. Okay, so this is the 1 year of grace period, but how does one tell the Israeli tax authority that he has immigrated, and how do we determine the date, the exact date that this happened?
That's a good point. So the Oled has to request the acclamation year, but not from the tax authority. Okay. A declaration or an application for acclamation year for tax purposes is applied at the Ministry of Absorption.
Okay.
That is the point of contact for requesting the acclamation year for tax purposes.
We'll leave a link to the website in the text accompanying this episode, in case you're wondering, so you can go in there. And if you're not applying for a year of acclamation, do you have to report to the Israeli tax authority the date that you have arrived?
No. One must only report to the Israeli tax authority, and especially Oleh, if he has income accrued from Israel and or elsewhere, income that he has to
only if he's
report.
Finding a report.
But how does he know if he's an Israeli resident or not?
Yeah.
That could be the question.
And how does he know the date, the exact date?
Right.
Do they have a certificate? Or
no, not necessarily. So there are two situations. If an Oleh comes to Israel, takes a plane, arrives here with all his family, starts living here, and only in Israel from here on, so the date is very clear. He doesn't have to request any certificate, and he doesn't have to apply for residency for tax purposes. And there could be cases where it's pretty clear, and if such a person wants a certificate or some paper that clarifies his status to make sure that he's an Israeli resident, he could apply on our website for a document number 913, a tofes in Israel, tofes 913.
Tofes is a form.
Hebrew,
in case you
wonder. And he applies to the tax assessor with this form, and he could automatically receive the verification that he's an Israeli resident. Okay. Now, in cases that are more complicated, and there are many cases where part of the family comes, or there's still a lot of ties abroad that determine residency, so you could apply to receive personal ruling, a personal determination. You write and describe all the
circumstances
that apply, and you could receive a personal determination of your residency.
Okay.
And this there's a system.
But if you're just wondering what the date is, would that be the date that you received an ID, the date that you landed, the date that for simple situations?
So the determination of residency is not dependent on any formal act or formal document or status determination. It takes account of various ties that determine the center of your livelihood, the center of interests. That covers family ties and business connections and social ties. This is written in the Israeli tax ordinance as characteristics, all these characteristics that determine your residency. There is also a quantitative test which states that if one was in Israel for over 183 years.
Okay, yeah.
Or there are other numbers for 1 year, 30 days, and in the 2 preceding years, 425 days, you would be considered a resident of Israel. There's also a quantitative test for foreign residency. But for someone who has some connections here and some connections there, so you'd look at the big picture, try to determine where the center of life is. If it's difficult to determine, so those are the cases that you would apply to receive a ruling to determine your citizenship.
Okay, thank you.
Your tax status,
Your tax,
not your citizenship. The citizenship, going back to your question, is not determinative at all, because you could be an Israeli citizen but foreign resident, and there's no formal document that you
So the
must
ID
have.
is irrelevant, the citizenship is irrelevant.
It could be one of many criteria that are taken into account, but you don't need a formal document to be an Israeli resident for tax purposes.
Okay. Thank you, Nava. And to all our listeners abroad, first of all, you can find links to many of the pages many of the information which we have discussed in this episode in the text that accompanies this podcast. You can also find a link there to our website in English, where you can follow latest updates in our policy. This episode is being recorded in October 2025. If you're listening a substantial period after that, it's worth going into our website and seeing if anything has changed. Maybe we have new benefits for you, which we weren't able to discuss when recording this episode. And we're waiting for you with open arms and ample benefits. And after you master Hebrew, you're welcome to catch up on other episodes of Podmas. Bye for now. Thank you, Nava.
Bye-bye.
יודגש כי הדברים המובאים בפרק זה אינם באים במקום הוראות החוק או הוראות נוהל שנקבעו. בכל מקרה של סתירה או אי התאמה בין האמור בפרק זה לבין הוראות החוק, קובעות הוראות החוק בלבד. עד כאן פודמאס להפעם. אתם מוזמנים להיכנס לדף הפייסבוק שלנו, שם תמצאו קישורים לדפים מעניינים מאתר רשות המיסים שהוזכרו במהלך הפרק.